Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to ETH Talk, your weekly look at the market in ETH Online. This is going to be the last ETH Talk before the expansion and I'm definitely looking forward to that. What I found most interesting last week was of course some of the information that came from ETH Down Under, including the trailer for the expansion. It was a little bit different from my perspective, I think, because it was focused on a game perspective rather than an in-game lore perspective, but it was pretty cool and we still don't know what these invasions are all about, how much grouping is needed, how big of a fleet you will need to make in order to tackle most of the stuff inside these invasions. It's going to be interesting to explore that. I do look forward to any experience and any information on these actual invasions. Then another thing that I thought was pretty damn interesting was a post on Reddit that showed a question or an answer rather from CCP Hilmar when he was asked about the staleness of 0-0 at the moment, and well, he mentioned local, he mentioned kicking over anthills, he mentioned maybe even setting them ablaze, and that he would rather make a mistake than do nothing. And so, well, I'm curious. My curiosity is definitely piqued here. I wonder if these words will be turned into actions when it comes to development of ETH Online. Definitely it sounds like it is on the radar, though, at least for the CEO. So we'll see how that pans out. And then, of course, a bit of a surprise to me, but well, the last mass test for the 64-bit client did work out quite nicely, and so we will have an opt-in open beta for the 64-bit client coming with the expansion as well. Sounds pretty damn interesting. Let's hope it all works out. As always, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store, but there are no sales at the moment. We've got lots of bundles. The Triclavian ships are front and center in this. I think that makes a lot of sense considering the expansion, of course, which is also focused on the Triclavians that are gonna pay is it K-Space? Regular space a visit, basically. Yeah, it's gonna be pretty damn cool, I think. And I, of course, personally, I might also want to mention that, look forward to that new Tech 2 heavy assault cruiser. We're gonna try to see how it compares to the Gila when it comes to an efficient exploration platform. I do think it has a lot of potential. Now let's move on to the market. That's why everyone is here, of course, and we are going to start with some plex and stuff at a 250. Like that. You may already have seen from the ticker that plex are up a little bit, 0.34% from last week. So we are basically still in that holding pattern, wait and see, flat over the course of now almost a month. That's rather unusual, right? You either have an upswing or a downturn, or at least some volatility. Here, super flat in the last week, in fact in the last couple of weeks. And I basically, as I've said, is my thinking is that the market is waiting for what's the invasion all about, what's the expansion about, will we get more of a roadmap, is there going to be more hype building for the game or not, or will the seasonal normal decrease in activity actually win out for CCP and ETH Online on this phase as well, and then we might start to see a downturn. So yeah, the market is still hesitating about where to go for plex. In Gita itself, they're selling for a bit over 4.4 million. Buyers are above 4.2 million. And then if we go to player-owned trade hubs, buyers hardly budge and the sellers go down to just above 4.3 million ISK for plex. After that, we've got the multiple pilot trade certificates staying above a 2 billion ISK, but also flattening out just above that on the chart. So we have that same increase in price, a lot more quickly, in fact, than plex in the last couple of months just. But then here at the top, we are hesitating to go higher. Do we start to decline quickly? Yeah, the market, I think, is basically waiting for the expansion and then the reception of that expansion. So we'll definitely need like a couple of weeks to absorb everything there. And then I think the market will decide on what to do with plex and stuff. The skill extractors, very same thing, some volatility at the tail end here, double top, just shy of 500 million ISK, but flat at the tail end, not really sure where to go. 487 million for the sellers, 484 for the buyers. You can see a super narrow margin at the top there. Not necessarily a sign that we are definitely going to decrease in price or definitely going to increase in price. I'd say that makes it a little bit more likely when you've got this super narrow margin, because it does show very strong demand. They're willing to pay up right up until those sell order prices as well. Let's take a look at the injectors next. Here are the large scale injectors, and finally a bit of a drop off. We went above a billion ISK, but that doesn't last forever. 995 million for the sellers, 976 to 977 for the buyers. Now that's a margin that starts to open up, and that is the sign, I think, that prices are going to start to decrease. So interest waning a little bit, but that is normal, of course, at these 1 year high points. These awesome prices, 30% increase over the last 9 to 10 months or something like that, is quite an expensive item all of a sudden, and so you can't sustain that forever. You can't sustain an increase in price forever, and so here we have a first small pullback in the price of the large scale injectors. Let's see if the small ones are doing the same. Yep, same pullback, very clear peak here, went up to 220 million ISK. It's now down to 204 million ISK, so that's already like a 16 million decrease in price from the sell order perspective, and the buyers have dropped to 195 million ISK. Not as pronounced a margin as the large scale injectors, but you can see that it is starting to open up, and we see the first signs of pressure on the prices in this category. And now we have the daily alpha injectors that actually showed that pattern last week already. This was my little canary in the coal mine, and so we went up to even 80 million on a day. Usually 75 million, you could consider that the peak. But now we are already back down to 66 million for the sellers and 60 million for the buyers, a healthy 10% margin. That is, in my opinion, a good sign that we have decreased back towards that average price range of, well, around 60 million ISK. So very interesting pullback here in the daily alpha injectors. The real question is, of course, how long can plex, and I keep double clicking when I don't want to, how long will plex be able to maintain this holding pattern here at a super high price, probably even an all-time high point? Well, we'll have to wait and see. I think the expansion and its reception will be instrumental for the market to make its decision. Moving on to the minerals at 735. Let's take a look at those. From the ticker, you may have seen that we have a little bit of a bump up for titanium after breaking 4.5 ISK. A little bit of volume increase here, but not that much in the days after that. So titanium went back up to 4.7 ISK almost, but then the problem shows up right away as well. 2 billion ISK as the latest sell order, and the buyers are at 4.5 ISK. So basically what happened was these sell prices kept being competed on. They were driven down super close to the buy prices, and then people took a pause. We actually have bit of buying probably at the slow points, and then you can see that nothing came in, or next to nothing came in, driving the price back up slowly for at least a couple of cents. And now that we're at 4.7, competition comes back in, and the first 2 billion are back up for sale. So this won't last very long, unfortunately, and the trend, that's where we have to be careful. Of course, will we continue a slow downtrend, or are we going to, like in the basically the last half year or so, be able to hold on to that price of above 4.5 ISK? But we keep testing it, so it is definitely under threat, I think. For pyrite, surprise little jump up to 4 ISK all of a sudden. Very interesting as well. 399 for the sellers, 386 for the buyers. Of course, some opportunistic sellers come in as well with 1.2 billion ISK, but this is actually a sharp little increase in price to 4 ISK, clearing us quite a bit from the 1 year low point of very close to 3 ISK. And I think here I'm going to speculate, but there are some war drums that are beating. Even the EVE Online Twitter mentioned that some of the larger groups seem to be gearing up for a war. So let's see if it actually turns out to be a hot war. Then we might see some destruction, and that might be good for mineral prices. After that, we've got Mexalon. This actually dipped down to 1 year low point of around 55 ISK. comes back to 60 ISK, 62.38 for the sellers, 58.31 for the buyers. So definitely a move up in tandem for both buyers and sellers. Slight volume spike here as well. I would say that this is actually investing. Considering that this is on the final days of this bottom here, I think that this is investing people that bought close to 55 ISK. And well, if there is a war in Nasdaq, that will actually turn out to be a very good purchase. After that, we've got our Isogen, where the bad news actually continues back towards 15 ISK. 1 year low point is being tested again. 15.24 for the sellers, 14.69 for the buyers. Poor Isogen, really, I think, together with Pyrite, but I think it's still a step up from Pyrite, the one that has suffered the most from the changes to mining, from the Rorcal, from the oversupply that exists in the game at the moment. Isogen has just become way too supply in the game, and it has completely devalued to something of 15 ISK, which is next to nothing. And it actually used to be one of those mainstays of, well, at least it's decent to have some Isogen in your cargo bay. After that, we have Noxium. All right. Another surprise, to be honest. I thought we were in for a below 300 ISK price range for the foreseeable future, because we still saw pressure across the board in most minerals, but nope, a jump up back in the 3 to 325 range. That is actually a very good performance. 319 now for the sellers, 300 ISK for Noxium, and so this is definitely like the third one that jumps up in the last week or so. Not really seeing it in the volumes, so might be a little bit of a drying up, and then people come back in. I think in the last 24 hours, yeah, of course, you do have 24 million units here as the latest sell orders. So someone, also on the 14-day pattern, someone is selling minerals across the board, taking advantage of these spikes. But you'd be, it would be a lapse if you didn't do that, especially if you do invest in minerals. This is a small opportunity, but at least it's an opportunity for profit, something that we haven't seen in a long time. And well, this puts Noxium for this 1 year chart probably above its average, which is a crazy thing to say. We actually have a mineral that on a 1 year chart is above its average, and Noxium has held on to that 300 to 325 range for the whole year now. Doing so is actually quite impressive if we look at the rest of the mineral market. After that, we've got Zydrine, which is still trying to hold on to 500 ISK, but you can see the slow decline breaking through that barrier. 501 for the sellers, 477 though for the buyers. So they want to drive the price back down. Sellers are hesitant to go below that, but I personally think that eventually they will break for that pressure, because Megasite is continuing its decline. It went straight through the 500 barrier, and then there is no stopping that. We've been going down for another 1.5 months pretty much. 444 ISK for the sellers, 417 for the buyers of Megasite. And here it is not just the Rorcal story, but it is definitely, of course, also the moon mining story that has precipitated the decline in value of Megasite. But minerals are still in a rough spot, but there are some very interesting little jumps in some of these minerals. And of course, the war drums are faintly beating, but who knows? Perhaps we will have an interesting time in EVE Online. If not, I personally do believe CSP Hilmar when he says that he wants some stuff on the roadmap to shake things up in Nasdaq, maybe even make mistakes rather than do nothing. And I think that that's actually the better way to look at it. After that, we've got Morphite, and that is another surprise jump. Very interesting, of course, up to 9,000 ISK now, 8,989, yeah, pretty much 9,000 ISK for the sellers, 8,500 ISK for the buyers. That is a very nice surprise jump, especially seeing that we come from another buy opportunity, and on two of these we could have probably bought Morphite for like 7,250 ISK or something like that pretty easily. This has to be Nasdaq related. This has to be related to the war drum. Some people must be preparing for that, grabbing either investments or already grabbing materials for the production lines, expecting actual losses. And I think here we're not seeing anything too much out of the ordinary when it comes to volume. So sure, we get some spikes, but we've had spikes like these before. And I think for more fights, I'm actually going to gamble on an actual purchase for reserves rather than for an investment to bring back to the market, because it is too sharp. It is basically an emptying out of everything below 9,000 ISK. It is not like a single purchase right around the bottom of the price range. So this is very, very interesting. More fight is of course tied to the Tech 2 economy rather than the Tech 1 economy, and I do think that that is what the reason why this spike up is actually for 1,000 ISK all of a sudden in the span of 1 week. That's very, very impressive. The other minerals tied to the Tech 1 economy, tied to the capitals and super economy, is a little bit different. Of course, it's I think less in the meta considering the general availability of Tech 2. We will first see I think Tech 2 fleets as their main bulk of activity if a war breaks out. Next up, the PI market at 1545. Let's take a look at these then. Is the trend continuing? Well, broadcast research knows jumping up to an average price of more than 2 million ISK. At least it's a bit of upwards pressure. 2,047,000 ISK, 48,000 actually for the buyers. For the sellers, excuse me. Buyers though are not budging. 1.9 million ISK, and they're just point-1ing each other right above that. But that's really it. 1.9 million still for the buyers of broadcast nodes, which, well, at this point I guess that not that many people have sold to the broadcast nodes to increase this price, but the average price is still a little bit below average despite this increase that we're seeing in the last couple of days. Construction blocks are, well, they had to give back their gains. They went back to an average of 12,000 ISK, which was normal, okay, nice resurgence. But then last couple of weeks we saw this massive drop off back to the 10,000 ISK range, and that's where we're still here. 11,500 for the sellers, 10,100 for the buyers. And considering these average prices, buyers are actually winning out as well on several days. Consumer electronics saw that same dip as well, is trying to fight back. Let's see where the sellers are at. 13,500, trying to get back to that 14k range. Definitely doing a decent job, a better job than construction blocks for that. Buyers though still at 12,700, well actually no, at 12,700 ISK, forced up a little bit at this point. So nice to see consumer electronics limit the damage there. Coolants next, continuing to, of course, decline in price after that one-year high point in March. It is a struggle to keep high prices at the moment, and right now they are going back down towards 10,000 ISK, 10,900 for the sellers, 10,000 ISK for the first buyer. After that it's 9,100, so this is completely a lack of interest in coolants. This is quite sharp. You might actually be interested in an investment here. I think there is a small opportunity, especially if you're patient. Watch for that this 10k to be gone and then try to buy well below that range. That is buying pretty much below the entire chart. That could be very, very interesting. This 1 year start here was when all bosses that did passive moon mining were replaced or had to be replaced by the new refineries. This caused such a massive dip that we went completely to a low point that was never seen before, I think, for coolants. So here this is actually a very sharp dip to a well below average price, and especially with the lack of buyers here, this does make for an interesting opportunity. Enriched uranium is continuing the decline as well. Same here, peak in March for these fuel-related PI materials, but they cannot hold on to that forever, of course. Back down to 12,000 ISK, 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. I would say this is actually a slightly below average price. 12,500 to 13k is probably a normal and average price for enriched uranium. So second one that also has to give back a lot of its ground and is back to a below average price. 11,000 for the buyers as well is definitely at the low end of the chart. Integrity response drones continuing to stay well below average as well, at around the 2.2 million range. 2.269 for the sellers, almost 2.1 million for the buyers. Decently narrow margin, but still pretty damn cheap. After that, we get mechanical parts, which actually counter to coolants and enriched uranium surprises with a double late peak in May, getting back to 13,000 ISK. Now, still at 13,150 for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers, though, so that margin is opening up. So there is probably, again, a less demand showing up that is going to start to actually decrease the price by opening up that margin more and more. You'll have impatient people, you'll have people that will start to cut down here in bigger chunks very quickly. You can see 14k, 13.8, 13.6, and then 13.2. And I wouldn't be surprised if this keeps dropping off. That we'll quickly see 12.5 and things like that on the seller side. So bit of pressure definitely in the fuel-related PI materials as well, and generally it does look like we are heading for a slightly depressed PI market at the moment, because nuclear reactors back down below 90,000 ISK on a 5-day moving average. It's still 98.5 K for the sellers, but it's 83,000 for the buyers, and again that lack of demand is pretty damn obvious here as well. Then we've got the organic mortar applicators now, just coming off of a 1-year low point, went as low as 940,000 ISK. It's back up to 1 million for the sellers, but it's 961,000 for the buyers. So super narrow margin at a very low price of around 1 million ISK for organic mortar applicators. Also well below average. Robotics, the one outlier, actually heading to an above average price here in the last month or so, doesn't have that March peak that we saw in the other fuel-related PI materials. 105,000 ISK for the sellers, 100,600 ISK for the buyers of robotics. Above average, one of the only ones in the category so far, because self-harmonizing power cores is continuing the trend, trading at around 1.9 million on average, a bit above that for the sellers, a bit below that for the buyers. It is definitely super cheap as well. Then we've got superconductors, also an outlier, but coming from here, definitely a dip as well. Just basically some volatility between, well, 11,000 and 14,000. That's decently good opportunity, I think. We're back at 13,400 for the sellers, 13,100 for the buyers. That is a surprise. That is actually very interesting to see this demand in superconductors driving the price up to an above average price again. Test cultures continuing to stay pretty low in the 6,000 to 7,000 ISK range, 7k for the sellers, 6,200 for the buyers. That's very cheap as well. And then finally, wetware mainframes, very interesting. Look at that drop off at the tail end, heading for 2 million ISK now, 2.1 million, a bit below that for the sellers, but just above 2 million for the buyers. So I'm really seeing a lack of demand in PI at the moment, driving prices down pretty much across the board. There are some exceptions, but if you look at this drop off here in the wetware mainframes, 1-year low point, definitely an opportunity if you expect CCP to come out with structure stuff in the medium to longer term. This is the chart to look at. Of course, I'm gonna have to give the same warning that I gave with plex and stuff. Summertime is coming. This might only be the beginning of a low demand period, and then of course you don't want to buy too soon either. Don't catch a falling knife. Considering the general vibe here, I would be careful when it comes to investing at least massively in PI, but spotting good opportunities like here, this 1-year low point in the wetware mainframes, I don't think you're making a mistake by gambling a little bit on that. Next up, advanced moon materials, 2330. Like that. And let's take a look here. Crystalline carbonite continuing to stay at less than 140 ISK. We do have some investments happening, I would say, considering that this is a purchase right after this dip right here, bringing the price back up to 140, pretty much 137.10 for the sellers, 126 for the buyers. So this must be I would say these two volume spikes here, basically buying anything that was available below 137. Which I think makes sense because you're still trading well below the entire chart here. Bring the price right up to that, but then, yeah, the market is not willing to go above that at the moment for the advanced moon materials. Ferrite carbide next, bouncing off of a 1 year low point as well, went as low as 122, back up to 131 for the sellers on a volume increase. It's not even noticeable here, so this is basically just a little bit of a market activity, a slight increase, but still super low, well below average. After that, we have the titanium carbide that was managing to hold on to a decent price range and is continuing to do so in this week as well, staying well above 175, 185 almost for the sellers, 183 for the buyers, super narrow margin. So titanium carbide is actually doing okay. Tungsten carbide next. Alright, nice little comeback as well, went back above 200 ISK. That's not so bad. 208 ISK for the sellers, 200 ISK for the buyers. This is a surprise situation. You've got crystalline carbonate and ferrite carbide that are basically at 1 year low points and just recovering from that complete clobbering. And then you've got titanium and tungsten that are back to, well, maybe slightly below average prices, but still decent prices considering this 1 year chart. Next up, we've got the metamaterials with photonics that are at 1 year low points. Basically, not sure if we even want to go an inch higher. 15,800 for the sellers, 14,900 for the buyers. Super cheap on this 1 year chart. Plasmonic metamaterials, yeah, bit of a surprise here. Actually went up to 22,500 ISK and has a slow decline, but is definitely trying to hold on as well. 20,500 for the sellers, 18,960 for the buyers. So definitely a margin opening up here, putting that pressure on the price. But considering the rest of the general vibe here in the advanced moon materials, this is actually doing quite okay. Then we have the nonlinear metamaterials that are spiking up. Strange surprise, up to 30,000 ISK all of a sudden, going above average. Very good news, I would say, for people that were looking forward to actually doing some trades. 29,500 for the sellers, 26,700 for the buyers. And just here in May, you could have bought this for well below 25,000 ISK. That's a trade to be made. Low point here in January, less than 22,500 ISK. That's a nice increase in price for 4 or 5 months of patience. Surprise performer here. Non-linear metamaterials, very sharp increase in price to a well above average one of practically 30,000 ISK. Not bad, good to see, because I was actually getting a little bit worried about a full and general pullback in the advanced moon materials category, but nope, look at this as well. Terahertz metamaterials, a bit like our Noxium of the minerals, holding on to that average price very well, staying at 25,000 for the sellers and 24,000 for the buyers. Definitely a respectable chart considering some of the low points that some of the other materials find themselves in. So very nice, especially this non-linear spike here is definitely a small opportunity to gain some ISK if that's an investment that you chose. Next up, we have the fermionic condensates. Went to a 1 year low point of less than 90,000 ISK, but volumes increased. Not sure if I would call that an investment or purchasing for production. I wouldn't be able to tell you, to be honest, but it's back up to almost 100,000 ISK for the sellers and 99,000 ISK for the buyers. That's what's interesting. Buyers forced up as well. Back to, it's still below average, but it's 100,000 ISK. That's a nice comeback, a nice 10% increase here in a pretty short order. Very good to see, actually. Ferrogel continuing to stay at a well below average price, 48,800 for the sellers, 46,900 for the buyers. That is at the lower end, but you know, look at what's happening in some of the others. Might be interesting, of course. Fullerite also went to 1 year low point, broke through the 875 ISK price range and jumped back up. So here, I think we will call it investments because we're not seeing too big a volume increase here. So there's no way that you're gonna buy so much Fullerite that it's gonna be like production for X months or a war chest or something like that. No, this is just buying everything below 980. Which is where the sellers are at, and then 964 for the buyers, driving the price up towards that range here. That's, in my opinion, an investment purchase. Hypersynaptic fibers next, flat, not at a low point, but definitely below average. Nano transistors, same pattern here as well. Phenolic composites actually at a 1-year low point, the second time in a couple of months that we reached this price range. 1,643 for the buyers, 1,620 for the, I messed that up, sorry, 1,643 for the sellers, 1,620 for the buyers, 1-year low points. If you're still looking for that advanced materials investment, well, this chart looks like a complete no-brainer. 1,600, and look where we were in September, August, September last summer, by the way. Yeah, 3,000 to 3,250. Can you imagine a big war? Can you imagine lots of of these production facilities getting blown up? Well, might be interesting when you look where we're at now. I might actually do this one myself. Ceramic fibers then, another one that actually shows good news, but again, not seeing the volumes create this, so I think that this is basically more position taking. Everything below 445 or something like that was probably purchased. 446 for the sellers, 440 for the buyers, though these move up very quickly as well. There's definitely some interest in this goods, and yeah, that's basically purchasing this dip right here as an investment as well. So very interesting. I'm actually quite surprised by that. I thought it would be more stale, but some of these are making some nice comebacks. We're definitely seeing some investments, and we even see our first breakouts in nonlinear metamaterials. That is very interesting. So let's hope that this is also part of the war drums that are beating, and that they'll actually get louder and louder, so that we see some nice activity in our advanced moon materials, and that if I go to the ticker, stuff like Fernite carbide might finally go back up, crystalline carbonate. So these are some of my small investments as well. 876 currently selling for 980. I could take a little bit of profit on that, but yeah, I have slowly bought a little bit of this stuff already. And I think at this point we're gonna look for the last best deals. So I still liked, as I've said, which one was it? The phenolic composite charts for actually still purchasing, but then let's hope for activity, Nalsic war, and some sell opportunities. Moving on to the Tech 2 ships, 3140. Like that, and with the jump in Morphite as well, some of these advanced moon materials starting to show up some volatility as well. Let's see if we see an impact. For the Aries, that's a big no. Trading at a 1-year low point, selling for 24 million ISK, buyers at 22.4 million ISK. Availability is still quite large, although new ships don't really come in that much because of this big backlog of almost 200 Aries at this low sell price. That's basically perhaps an opportunity, but is the Aries that much in the meta? I'm not entirely sure. We know that logistics cruisers can be, though. Look at that volume, man. Look at that volume increase. Yeah, we went to 220 million ISK, and then now we've got this purchasing, and we are back at 271 for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. I think this is alliance purchasing. Basilisk logistics cruisers, definitely something that that they need. Their fleets of those are probably getting prepped, and so here that's what I'm seeing. We went to a well below average price here, had a second little dip down to 230, and that was the trigger. Yeah, looks like more war preparation. I do like that as a sign for that. The Cerberus next, continuing its downtrend actually. Let's see how close to 200 million the buyers are at. 212 for the first buyer, 230 for the sellers. That is a well below average price for the Cerberus. And availability, let's take a quick look at that. That's actually quite decent. I wouldn't be surprised if we also start to see a purchase of the Cerberus. Perhaps they're waiting for that 200 million range to be achieved by the buyers, but will that still be possible? I'm not exactly sure, because we are starting to see some signs of actual interest. The Crow went as low as 25 million, bouncing off of that a little bit. 27.7 for the sellers, 22 million still for the buyers. So you're still buying super cheap Crows right here if you manage to snag them, because the volumes are pretty damn low. And then the Guardian, look at that again, volume increase. We went as low as 200 million ISK, so this could be partly investment as well, but we are up to 244 million for the sellers, 214 for the buyers. That's also the volatility that is tradable, of course. One year low point, if you bought well below 200 million, you can now sell to 240. That's a nice profit to take. So logistics cruiser number 2, big increase in volume, price back to, I'd say, average or above average, but definitely coming from this 1 year low point. This is either very aggressive speculation or war preparation, and my personal money is on the second at this point. The Heretic, not on the radar just yet, staying below 70 million ISK. Buyers are at 61.2 million ISK. That's definitely pretty cheap as well. Then we've got the Hound. Yeah, bit of interest in the Hound for sure. Look at these volume spikes. We went as low as 26.5 million. It's now trading for 32.9. Unfortunately, I think I'm trying to sell one still at 37 million ISK. I was a bit aggressive. Yep, here they are. So I'll have to wait for an actual big spike during the war, something like that, to actually sell them at my profit margin that I want to achieve. I have my patience. We're just going to keep that sell order up until it is over or until it sells. But here, definitely renewed interest in the Hound as well. Increased volumes and price driven up back above 30 million, almost 33 for the sellers, in fact. The Ishtar continuing that slow decline, and I find this to be a massive opportunity. It is an expensive one. It's 200 million ISK, but the sellers are at 202 million. The buyers are at 187 million, and Ishtar fleets do happen. So this is crazy. This is below the entire chart. 1 year low point. Average price is now breaking down to less than 200 million ISK. Availability still 63 being brought to the market here at 202. This is kind of crazy if you want cheap Ishtars. I think this is the time to buy one and just grab one as an investment. I think it makes a lot of sense if we look at this chart, to be honest. Then we've got the Manticore. Also, yeah, stealth bomber logistics, I think looks to be the front line of the preparations, because this is a lot of volume, more than 2 times and more than 3 times the normal average. Bring the price up from 28.5 to 32 million for the sellers, again 27 million for the buyers. They're staying behind a bit, but definitely renewed interest, and this again, in my opinion, war preparation. The Munin, other side of the coin here, going back down to 1 year low point as well. 204 million for the sellers, 202 for the buyers. The heavy assault cruisers, this is, Ishtar, Munin, Cerberus. That's not where the emphasis lies at this point, and that's where you can actually grab some cheap ones. But eventually, heavy assault cruisers might find their way in the meta, so it pays to be prepared, I think. Nemesis, also slight volume increase, but that was a while ago, and it's not trading at its 1 year low point or anything like that. 27.4 for the sellers, 25 for the buyers, so an in-between price, a bit below average. Not that interesting, I think. The Oneros logistics cruiser continuing down towards a 1 year low point as well. 180 million for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. Super big margin. Availability though, that's where the problem will lie. 16, 22, etc. It's going to be pretty tricky to actually buy a full Oneros fleet or something like that without driving the price up quite substantially. But if you manage to snag one for 153 or just above that, that is very cheap. It looks to be possible actually if you look at where these average prices go down to. A somewhat aggressive buy price, let's say 154, 155 should be possible, but be wary of the volumes, of course. These are very low. It's I would say the least popular logistics cruiser in the bunch. Then we get the Purifier continuing its decline as well, substantially below 30 million, 28.3 for the sellers, 26.4 for the buyers. Well, here is a choice to make, right? Very close to 1 year low point. Buyers are at 26.4 million, 26.5 is here. That is definitely pretty cheap. And then, of course, here is the Hound chart, little spike up. Here is the Manticore chart. That's pretty damn nice. Do you think that the same could happen for the Purifier? That is, of course, the gamble of the market that you have to decide on at this point, I think. Then we get the Saber. Definitely still trading well below average at this point. 67 million for the sellers, 63 million for the buyers. That's still pretty damn cheap as well. Something to think about as well, in my opinion. Interdictors, definitely primaries. You don't need like a whole fleet of interdictors necessarily, but definitely primaries. First one to be destroyed. So this could be interesting as well. I like this Saber chart myself. In fact, a while ago I tried to buy one. I failed because I was a bit too aggressive with my buy price. But now you could try to grab one for less than 65 million ISK, and I don't think that's going to be a bad one. Yeah, I like this one as well. I like, as I've said, the Ishtar. I like that. And then here the Saber looks pretty damn interesting. Then we've got the Scimitar. Again, volume increase. Definitely seeing some war prep in that as well. We went to a 1-year low point of 190 million ISK, now selling for 223. Buyers up to 197. Not that much of an impact, but those volumes are substantial. 3 days in the last less than 10 that are double the normal volumes, and even the averages clearly increasing. Stiletto next. Okay, 1-year low points went down to 26 million, now selling for 31 million ISK. Bit of volatility, a trade that you could make or could have made. Very interesting week here in the Tech 2 ship market, in my opinion. We're seeing 1-year low points, we're seeing some breakouts, and we're seeing renewed interest, especially at this point in what I think is definitely the forefront of war preparations, in logistics cruisers and in stealth bombers as well. Stuff that you will need to replace time and time again, because, well, in the bombers you'll make a mistake at some point and then your whole fleet is gone, and logistics tend to be like a part of the fleet that needs to be broken in order to get through the fight, so gets lost a lot as well. So very interesting. Next up, the Tech 3 ship market at 41.5. Like that. And yeah, my voice still struggling a little bit because of that cold, but I'm doing my best. I hope everything is understandable. Let's get started here with the Confessor, continuing a slow decline, well below 40 million at this point. 38 million for the sellers, 34.6 million for the buyers, and the supply is the problem. 82, 40, 31 in the last 24 hours. It's not that bad, but it's definitely more than what we've seen in the last couple of months, and as a result we are going back to a price that's well below 40 million ISK, around the average price 37.5 million. So I think what happened here, the Confessor went up to 42.5 and producers overreacted a little bit by maybe 100 chips, couple hundred chips, something like that in the last couple of weeks, and thus the price has been driven down back to an average 37.4 million, where I expected that 40 million would become the average across the board for the destroyers at this point. But there's a bit too much in the Confessor market, and so we are dipping below that. Next up, we've got the Hecate that is holding on to 44 million, something like that. 44 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers. And here we still see, look at that, half a front page in the last 24 hours, but 21, 11, 11. It's a little bit less, it's more doable for the market, and so what we have to be careful of course, is now the Hecate is worth quite a bit more than the Confessor. If they switch too much production, we might see the same pattern again. Let's take a look at the Jackdaw. Full breakout, volume increase. Again, I'm saying war prep, guys. This is very interesting. So do I have Jackdaws? I think I have a few Jackdaw investments. I think it's going to be selling time. 52 million for the sellers, 49 million for the buyers. You see that some volumes already, some investors already, right? 52, 29. This is definitely a decent amount, but nothing too crazy still. That is what surprises me the most. I thought maybe someone had a couple hundred Jackdaws ready to take advantage of a spike like this, but no. War prep, great opportunity for the Jackdaw, and this gives me hope actually for the Confessor market to dry up, to normalize back to 40 and up, because now they're gonna produce Hecates, they're gonna produce Jackdaws rather than Confessors, and this is why, of course, war is good for business. Look at that Jackdaw spike, 50 million. You could have bought these for 40 million. I've always been pretty hesitant. And then here we had these bottoms at 35 million. Now that's a nice profit, of course, but you needed a lot of patience for that. I'm In fact, it's been such a long time, I'm not even sure if I have any jackdaws available for sale. And then finally we have the Zwepel as well, flat below 40 million. Volumes are the worst. This is of course the least popular one, but then the good news is, despite a full half front page in the last 24 hours, in fact more than that, we do have the 41 here, but other than that it's 27115. That is the low volumes that you would expect in the least popular tech tree destroyer. Not the cheapest one anymore, that's the Confessor, but I think the Confessor, the Hecate and the Jackdaw are going to have to start to have that interaction where production is going to switch from the Confessor to these two others, especially the Jackdaw. I think that'll be driven down decently quickly, but giving the Confessor some breathing room to go back up. So still healthy market. We are seeing increased volumes, but luckily now we are also seeing increased interest in at least some of these. Very interesting. Next up we have the cruisers. Here is the Legion continuing its decline to 140 million. It's 143 for the sellers, 135 for the buyers. And here this would be where the opportunity lies, I think, for a potential war, because if a war prep comes in, Legion definitely part of the front line as well. And this is 1 year low point. Availability is not that great, there's nothing too crazy, so if there is renewed interest all of a sudden in the Legion fleet, I mean, where is it gonna go? All the way to the stratosphere in absolutely no time, and you're buying for less than 135 million ISK below the entire chart. This is definitely something to take a very close look at and to make decisions on. Same here with the Loki. You can see that we are bouncing off of 150 million, 160 for the sellers, 151 for the buyers, but this is still really below the entire chart. And availability here, we do have 42 and 38, but the rest of it, it's definitely not that crazy. Then we've got the Proteus that just took a nosedive as well in the last couple of weeks, down to 130 million ISK, 128 for the sellers, 115 for the buyers. Super cheap. I'm not sure if the Proteus is the one to gamble on, but who knows, if they won't take 3 ships and then you need a cheap or you need one and the others spike up, it might actually happen. And then the Tango is the odd one out. That one is holding on to a slightly below average price and actually jumping up in the last week. 158 million for the sellers, 147 for the buyers. And availability, again, it's definitely not crazy. This is primed for, I think, a massive comeback if the war interest finds its way to these strategic cruisers. This is kind of crazy. This is an interesting time to be looking at the markets. And then for the extra product, we're gonna take a look at the faction cruisers. It's gonna be 4710. It's been a while since we took a look at these, so we're gonna go for ships, cruisers. We'll include the ones for the Triglavians, just out of interest. Roldiva, 111 million ISK, 100 million for the buyers. That is still pretty damn expensive. Vedmak, 160 million and 140 million. That's for basically a Tech 1 ship. That is still, yeah, precursors are still very expensive, of course, considering that they are being introduced to the game at this point. But we were interested in the faction cruisers. We'll start with the Pirate faction cruisers. Here is the Ashimu, 66 million and 58 million for the buyers, basically trading around average. Yeah, looks like an average price on this 1 year chart. Cinnabal, 1 year low point. That is interesting. 134.2 million for the sellers, 123 for the buyers. That is pretty cheap. Cinnabal, definitely well below average, in fact just at around a 1 year low point. Next up we get the Ortrus, a little bit of pressure at the tail end here, but holding on to almost 200 million, 201 for the sellers, 191 for the buyers. An average price, maybe a touch below, but not by much. Normal price for the Ortrus. Then we get the Phantasm, flat at 90 million ISK. I think historically is actually very cheap. It's less than that for the sellers. 83.6 million for the buyers. It doesn't show on the chart, at least we are below average, but this I think is pretty cheap for the Phantasm. Then we get the Stradios that went to a low point in the month of April, something like that. Is now trying to recover a little bit, selling for 158 million to 160 million on most of them, 147 million for the buyers. Below average, pretty cheap and affordable Stradioses, and also a ship that I actually still need to make a video on, giving it a good test drive in exploration. My brother got me an interesting fit. I think I'm gonna try to replicate it and make a video on that as well. Then we get the Gila actually trading now for really pretty damn low prices. You do see the volatility here, of course, the Abyss, things like that. It is the #1 ship in a lot of things, and so as a result, its low point, its stable point here is actually more expensive than most of the others. 185 million for the sellers, 173 for the buyers, but this is quite available. This is an okay price for I would say the most powerful faction cruiser, pirate faction cruiser. Vigilant trading below average, not that big in volumes, of course. Vigilant 189 for the sellers, 180. It's actually a respectable price. It's even more expensive, the Vigilant, than the Gila, so it looks like that one is quite rare. Galente Space, Serpentis sights, this BPC drops, and that's worth a lot of ISK. Very, very nice actually, but trading below average as well. So right now, pirate faction cruisers, most of them are trading at decently low prices, especially the Cinnabal is interestingly low. Then we get the Navy faction price cruisers. Let's take a look at that. Here is the Augur Navy issue for Amar. Bit of a dip at the tail end. Not much to say on this chart. I thought we'd see more faction warfare seasonal changes, but that doesn't happen. I guess these super low volumes are to blame. Caracal Navy issue, that's going to be a bit more clear. 1 year low point for the Caracal Navy issue, 52 million for the sellers, 46 million for the buyers. So you're grabbing these below 50 million, no problem. Which means Caldari LP is super cheap at the moment, so Caldari are winning out in faction warfare. If you're looking for that faction warfare investment, well, here is the Caracal Navy issue for less than 50 million ISK. Definitely a nice opportunity, super pronounced as well, and look at the potential, double that on bad times for Caldari faction. So I would say grab Caldari Navy issue, Caracals, and go fight for the Galente. Executor Navy issue, opposite side of the Caldari. Unfortunately, again, terrible volumes, so not easy to see exact, not as pronounced as the Caracal Navy issue, but obviously up in price a little bit. Then I think I'll just move up to that Vixor Navy issue to show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. Went down to 50 million ISK in March, April, and now Caldari is, taking names. As a result, we are increasing in price, and we are selling these now for 85 million ISK, 80 million for the buyers. And this is why this market is super, super interesting. You have especially the more popular ones. Look at that the trade volumes, 400-500 a day is easily possible. Caracal Navy issue, not even that great, but definitely the more popular ship. Look at that decline in price. Look at that increase in price here. Very, very impressive, very interesting. So we stopped here at the Omen Navy issue. Here, unfortunately, again, bad volumes make this trade a little bit harder and make this chart less pronounced, but going down in price. And so I think that here we have Osprey Navy issue again. Also Caldari, look at that decrease in price from 80 million ISK, now selling for 50 million, buyers at 45 million. Caldari are doing awesomely well, it would seem, in faction warfare, but this also creates an incredible opportunity. And in the side fleet issue, you'd expect Minmatar to go back up a little bit, same with the Stabber, back up a little bit, but it looks like in the Amar Minmatar faction warfare, then the way I would read this is that it's not as one-sided as what we're seeing in Caldari versus Galente. And keep in mind, this works. This is pretty awesome, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that there are people that basically play the game this way. They have faction warfare characters, maybe even whole corporations in all factions, and so at the moment they're saying we're gonna make the Caldari win. We're gonna have super cheap LP. We're gonna make lots of these Caracal Navy issues. We're gonna stock up, and then we're gonna move our capabilities to the other side, and we're gonna switch things around. And then you as an investor might actually be able to ride those waves if you keep a closer eye on this market. That makes this super interesting. Something that I want to do at some point. I think, you know, make an account, make some faction warfare characters, have some fun that way, and then also try to stay on top of these investments. But for me, it's definitely also like time-wise that I gotta be a little bit careful with all my plans. But I do have plans, ambitions in EVE Online, guys. I still have dreams for the game and for myself in the game, so no need to worry about that. When, you know, last videos were not as ambitious, I do agree with that. I saw a comment explaining or pointing that out. But when you're sick, yeah, then ambition does tend to take a backseat to your health a little bit. But for now, yeah, very interesting situation here. Caracal Navy issue, compare that to Fixer Navy issue. This is what we like to see, of course, when it comes to EVE Talk. That's gonna be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.